Addiction is not the enemy. It is the silent cry of a forgotten soul. No one chooses to be addicted. No one wakes up one day and says, "I want to lose everything. I want to slowly destroy myself." Addiction, as Carl Jung said, is much more than compulsive behavior. It is a symptom of a soul in deep disconnection, a desperate cry for reconnection with something greater, something lost, perhaps with God, perhaps with oneself. Behind every addiction there is pain, an existential hole that silently cries out for relief, for love, for meaning. And often, addiction appears not as evil or weakness, but as the only emotionally bearable way out for those who are on the brink of the abyss. In this video, we'll dive into the deep roots of the psychology of addiction through the eyes of Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers on the human soul. You'll understand that addiction is, first and foremost, a wake-up call, a sign that something inside us is trying to emerge, even if it's through self-destructive means. And in the end, you may discover that it's not the addiction that needs to be fought, but the pain that created it. That true healing lies not in willpower, but in the courage to look within, with compassion, with awareness, and with love. Oh, and before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. This ensures that you'll receive more deeply transformative reflections like this one, straight to your journey. Chapter 1. The Inner Abyss, where addiction is born. There is an emptiness that cannot be seen in medical exams, a hole in the chest that no one can measure, but that corrodes from within, day after day. It is in this invisible space that many addictions are born, not as a choice, but as anesthesia. Carl Jung understood that addiction was the psyche's response to deep suffering. He did not see the addict as weak, but as someone trying to survive unbearable existential pain with whatever resources he had. This pain often arises from a disconnection from the meaning of life, a loss of identity, or unresolved traumas that become internal ghosts. Imagine a soul crying out for help in a dark room. Addiction is like a candle lit in that room. It doesn't solve the darkness, but it does momentarily alleviate the fear. Whether it's alcohol, food, sex, social media, or overwork, everything becomes a refuge, a place to not feel. Jung said that human beings need meaning as much as they need air. When they find no purpose, they seek pleasure. When they find no belonging, they seek distraction. And when the pain of the soul finds no listening, addiction becomes comfort. How many times have you felt like you were falling apart inside and no one saw it? How many times have you tried to silence the scream with something that only hurt you even more? It's not weakness, it's tiredness, it's despair, it's a lack of space to exist truthfully. At this point in the journey, we need to look at that void without judgment, because addiction doesn't start with behavior, it starts with pain. And if we want to break free from it, the first step is to listen to the pain that created it. Chapter 2. Jung and the Cry of the Soul. For Carl Jung, addiction was not just a behavioral issue, it was a spiritual cry. He said, "Every addiction is an unholy attempt to attain that which only divine experience can provide." In other words, the addict is unconsciously seeking God, seeking the self, seeking to reconnect with something greater than his or her pain. Jung realized that an addict is someone who has lost his axis, who has lost connection with his essence, with his center. And when he loses this center, he tries to compensate for this existential hole with substances, habits, or relationships that offer a momentary illusion of completeness. But deep down, nothing fills him. Addiction, then, is not just a problem. It is a symptom. It is a sign that the soul is in crisis, crying out for reconnection. And this call needs to be heeded with wisdom, not with condemnation. Spirituality, according to Jung, is not an escape from reality, but a bridge to reconnect with it on a deeper level. Therefore, the healing process does not begin with repression, but with awareness, with the recognition that what we seek outside is actually inside, waiting to be rescued. And if this video has touched some part of you so far, that part that you might hide even from yourself, then leave a like now, not out of vanity, but to signal to the universe that you're ready to dive deeper. The path will not be easy, but it is in the deepest dive that the soul finds its true surface. Chapter 3. The Escape that Becomes Prison. At first, addiction seems harmless, a quick fix, a respite from the pain, something that offers the illusion of control, but over time, what once served as an escape becomes a prison, and what seemed like freedom becomes emotional captivity. This is how the cycle of addiction begins: pain, relief, guilt, more pain. Addiction seduces with promises of comfort, but delivers invisible chains. And the worst part? The chains don't just bind the body, they bind the soul. They bind hope. They bind the belief that it's possible to live another way. Jung believed that everything we repress comes back stronger, and that is what addiction does. It is born from denied pain and grows, fueled by silence and denial. The more we try to ignore it, the more it dominates. Because addiction doesn't just want to be satisfied, it wants to be seen, it wants to be understood. And maybe you know that place, the place where you promise to stop, and then you go back. The place where you feel weak, like a failure, ashamed. But the truth is, that's not weakness. That's a psychic system trying to deal with unresolved trauma. That's the unconscious screaming for integration. No one wants to become a slave to what once served as a shelter. But that's exactly how addiction works. It gives you the key to a cell, and you, without realizing it, walk in and lock the door from the inside. But there is a way out, and it starts when you understand that it's not about fighting the addiction, it's about listening to what it's trying to tell you. Chapter 4. The Scream. No one hears behind every addiction there is a cry, a silent cry from someone who does not feel seen or understood. And perhaps one of the most cruel pains of the addict is this: invisible loneliness. People judge behavior, but they don't see the wound. They say, just stop, as if it were simple to turn off the pain that beats deep in the soul. They ignore the fact that often addiction is the only embrace someone has found in the midst of emotional abandonment. Jung knew that the human psyche becomes ill when it is isolated. Human beings were not born to live without listening, without affection, without belonging. But when the pain is too great and there is no room to share it, addiction appears as a false friend. It welcomes even if it destroys. It listens even if it keeps quiet. Many people live in shame. They carry a burden on their chest, pretending that everything is fine, while inside they are falling apart. And the worst part, they feel like they can't speak, that no one would understand, that no one would really care. If you've ever felt this way, invisible, suffocated, trapped inside yourself, write in the comments, "I've felt this scream." It's not weakness to expose your pain, it's courage. And maybe by commenting, you'll help others realize that they're not alone in this battle. You are not alone. Here, you are heard. Here, you are understood. Chapter 5. The Awakening. When pain becomes truth. There is a moment, silent, intimate, almost sacred, when something inside the addict awakens. It is not a scream, it is not a revolt, it is a whisper, a flash of lucidity that breaks through the fog of repetition. And in that moment, he does not just see the addiction, he sees the pain behind it. It is at this point that addiction ceases to be just a problem and reveals itself as a symptom, a crooked mirror that reflects the truth we avoid facing, the truth that there is an unhealed wound, an unaddressed trauma, an abandonment that still lives on, even though time has passed. Carl Jung called this moment individuation, the process in which the individual begins to integrate what was previously in the shadows. He begins to see pain not as an enemy, but as a messenger. He begins to understand that addiction does not need to be fought with hatred, but rather embraced with awareness. That's where the transformation begins. Not when the person forces themselves to change, but when they understand, when they realize that addiction is not the cause of their downfall, but the alarm that something needs to be rescued within them. This change is profound because there is no longer an internal war, and there begins to be listening. And when pain is finally heard, it loses its power to dominate us. If you are in this moment, if you have begun to see the pain with different eyes, know this: you have already begun the healing. Because true liberation does not come from outside. It begins the moment you allow yourself to see, with truth, with compassion, with courage. Chapter 6. The Path. Back home, spirituality, self-knowledge, and healing addiction is an attempt to return. An unconscious search for an inner home that has been lost, whether through pain, trauma, or emotional abandonment. But the true path back home does not involve denying who we are. It involves integrating all that we are: light and shadow, strength and fragility. Carl Jung believed that healing only happens when an individual reconnects with the self, the truest core of their soul. And this is not achieved by repressing addiction, but by understanding its language. Addiction is, in essence, a call for reconciliation with that which has been forgotten within us. And this is where spirituality comes in, not as an imposed religion, but as a return to the sacredness of one's own existence, as an opening to mystery, to surrender, to inner silence. When we find meaning, even in the midst of pain, addiction begins to lose its hold, because the void that once screamed for anesthesia begins to be filled with presence, with awareness, with truth. Healing also involves self-knowledge, the courage to look inside yourself honestly, name your pain, accept your flaws, and forgive yourself. This is not weakness, it is power. The noblest of all, the power to free yourself. And if this video resonated with you, share in the comments, "I'm coming home." This phrase is not just symbolic. It is an act of courage, a declaration to yourself that despite the pain, you are choosing awareness, you are choosing love, you are choosing life. You are not your addiction. You are the one who survived it. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you is tired of running away, tired of numbing yourself, tired of hurting yourself to endure what shouldn't hurt anymore. In this video, we saw that addiction is not just a moral failing. It is a symptom of an old, deep, neglected pain. Jung taught us that healing begins when we stop fighting the addiction and start listening to the soul that suffers behind it. You are not weak, you are hurt. And it is precisely by recognizing this that you have the strength to change. Spirituality, self-knowledge, lovingly, listening to one's shadow, all of these are part of the return home. And this return home doesn't happen in a day, but begins with a step, a real step, a step of compassion. And if this video spoke to some forgotten part of you, don't leave without subscribing to the channel, but not because you have to, because you deserve to. Because you deserve to walk alongside reflections that embrace your pain, respect your journey, and strengthen your soul. Here, you will always be seen and never judged.